So, as I have said before, we are keeping an eye on the EU reform bill. Of course, a quick reminder to those who may have forgotten about this, or maybe it's your first time hearing about this particular bill in the first place. So, just a quick rundown of what this bill essentially imposes to do. So, this bill is being brought in by Jacob Rees-Mogg as part of the, if you may remember, Liz Truss's big policy blitz. This was the big thing that Jacob Rees-Mogg had to pitch, and this would be getting over 2,000 EU laws off the books completely. But of course, after lawyers, experts from all industries and sectors have had a look at this, they've said, look, if you pass this bill and you just randomly start getting rid of EU laws, it is going to be an absolute disaster. First of all, our Whitehall and current government does not have the time in the space of a year that they are suggesting before the sunset clause kicks in, where they all just automatically just go like that. It would be just not enough time to be able to do this, which could risk hundreds of thousands of laws basically being blown up. And it got even more funnier because they found even more laws, EU laws, that this bill would also affect that aren't actually included in the bill. Not to also say that many EU laws have had UK government sort of alterations and additions over the years. So you would potentially be blowing massive holes in laws if this bill went through. And luckily, there has been a very significant fight against it, and there still continues to be very significant resistance to this bill as well. So that's a quick update. So we're all on sort of the same page. So what's been happening since? Where are we now? What are the chances of this bill certainly going forward? Because I tell you now, there is going to be a big, big fight, certainly when this bill sort of goes more forward from its current position. So before we go diving into this, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. So over we go today to the Yorkshire bylines with the title of The Brexit Freedoms Bill, Bad for Your Health and the Country's. Of all the dangerous anti-democratic pieces of legislation brought forward by our government since Brexit, one of the most controversial is the retained EU Law Bill, or the Revocation and Reform Bill, or the ERUL, better known as the Brexit Freedoms Bill. That the supposed Freedoms Bill claims to proffer, it seems to be as elusive as so-called Brexit benefits. With the title of A Bill to Revoke Retained EU Law to Make Provisions Retaining to the Implementation of Retained EU Law and its relationship with other laws, to make provisions relating to powers to modify retained EU law, to enable the restatement, replacement, or updating of certain EU laws, to enable the updating of replacement or replacement provisions, the abolishment of businesses' impact of targets, and connected purposes. Again, like I say, it's a whole lot of guff. And it's not just this. The entire bill is just not fit for purpose, as we've discussed a lot of this other times. So, this bill was introduced by former Prime Minister Liz Truss during her very brief stint in Number 10. It is sponsored by the staunch Brexiteer Jacob Rees-Mogg and the Department for Business, Energy and International Strategy, and is currently making its way through the House of Commons. The aim of the bill is to replace almost 4,000 EU laws currently on the British statute books. These laws provide protection for a wide range of hard-won protections, including workers' rights, food safety, animal standards, welfares, environmental protections, and many more. Although the government has pledged that no lower standards in the process of revoking and reforming EU law, it is increasingly hard to find anyone who takes that promise at face value, especially when so many of the Brexit promises have already proven worthless. And according to the bill's public dashboard, over 570 of the EU laws relate to the Department of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, to over 400 to Transport, 300 to the Treasury, 300 to the BIS, and 200 to the Revenue and Customs, and 208 to Work and Pensions. And that's assuming, of course, that these government figures are reliable. Up until the beginning of November, only 2,400 laws had been actually identified, with a further 1,400 with also recently being discovered by government researchers. And though, according to Rees-Mogg, these additional laws ones were, quote, ones departments did not use and were dredged up, he added that removing them is simple. In his own business department, over 77 full-time staff are said to be working on the 318 laws related to that department alone. Whether the wider government has enough civil servants to handle all these EU laws is also another unanswered question. But in a recent survey of company directors by the British Chamber of Commerce, there was very little even understanding of the government's proposals. Half of those surveyed said that deregulation was either a low or non-existent priority, with just 4% claimed to have a comprehensive understanding of the bill and its impact on their businesses. And according to William Bain, head of the trade policy at the BBC, businesses are, quote, not clamoring for a bonfire of regulations for the sake of it. He warned that divergence from EU regulations would, quote, add to the company costs at a time where businesses are already struggling with soaring inflation and other barriers to trade with the EU. The fact that businesses are largely critical of the bill is also being ignored. The party that used to claim to be the defenders of business and the economy no longer seem to be claiming to protect either. The Tory party are no longer listening except to themselves. So, the latest criticism does come from the British Safety Council, and the chief executive, Mike Robertson, has recently wrote that the government seemed, quote, hell-bent on destroying the UK's record for health and safety. While acknowledging that there are areas of legislation that could be improved, Robertson had said that, quote, the big risks involved with the government's approach, and he drew particular attention to high-risk industries like construction and chemicals. And he expressed concern over the potential replacement of existing protections while responsibilities being imposed on duty holders. He asked, are we really going to leave it up to individual businesses to decide for themselves? I guess that's one way of interpreting taking back control. And Robertson stated that the bill must be changed or scrapped on the basis that it would be too damaging and risky to go ahead. And that's another thing that has become very, very clear, that a lot of these responsibilities and who manages the risks of this health and safety aspects of this, especially in the chemical industry, which we've already reported about a couple of months ago, is really worrying, because you're now going, okay, business, you're now in charge of self-regulating. Would you think it's going to happen? Businesses have an absolutely awful, a terrible track record of self-regulating, and we're just going to hand massive regulatory oversight over to the business community. It's not going to go well. It is absolutely not going to end well. So back to it. The bill also gives the government the power to, quote, just switch off EU laws at the end of 2023 without even the consultation with Parliament or the public. The so-called sunset clause means that any EU legislation will be still on the books by the end of the year, will just simply expire, along with protections, rights, and even standards of any such laws sought to safeguard. The government's own independent assessor has described the government proposals as not fit for purpose, with regard to the sunset clause in particular, and the watchdog said the government had not even provided sufficient grounds for the decision. So, although the bill may have already passed its second reading in the House of Commons, its further passage is not expected to go smoothly. Many of the amendments are currently in the pipeline, and there is likely to be a fierce debate in the House of Lords. But the battle will not just take place in the halls of Parliament. Opposition is widespread, with so many industries and sectors affected, from legal experts to unions, environmentalists to farmers, from businesses and leaders to economists, human rights activists, and even health professionals. The opposition is as far-reaching as the rights that EU laws protect. Whether your personal passion is one of the areas affected, nature, pardon me, nature, animal welfare, food safety, human rights, or just all of them, this bill is damaging and dangerous. It's completely unnecessary. The rights that we have have to work fewer hours, eat safer food, and even treat animals and the environment with respect and care, etc., took many years to actually agree to and be protected by law. We cannot allow this irresponsible government, driven solely by ideology, to undo all this work with one fell swoop. If the government is successful, we will pay a terrible price, and that is neither one that the public nor the country can afford. EU law is not bad for our health and safety, but unfortunately, the same cannot be said of our current government. And that is it. I think one thing that really does bear repeating that said at the end there, so many of these laws took years to get in place. They took years and decades, even to be legally protected as well, and get them on the statute books. It is not easy to get, a law protecting some of this stuff in and through Parliament. It is not easy. And this bill is so dangerous that it could wipe out hundreds of thousands of laws. And I'm really glad that especially opposition parties have put so many amendments to this bill. And like I say, if it goes to the House of Lords, there is going to be an almighty fight in there about this bill. Not only that, but there are big questions about whether even the Conservatives themselves might split over this bill. And we have seen very recently Rishi Sunak try to head off a potential rebellion over giving, over the onshore wind farms. And then he caved into that. And that ban has now been looked at being lifted in the next bill. But to head off another potential rebellion, thanks to the Net Zero Scrutiny Group, they demanded a coal mine for them to support the bill. And of course, that's what they got. So this bill is going to be absolutely disastrous if this goes through. There's going to be so many consequences. And, we've said it before years ago. We have taken, certainly in this country, a lot of rights that we have gotten from the EU for granted for so many years. And the worrying thing is that overnight, a lot of people will just lose those rights, especially the EU Working Time Directive. That one is a big one that's going to affect so many people, because so many companies out there are just going to start exploiting their workers, just making them work longer hours. And that is the danger that this bill really has. And then you've got, the health and safety aspects. The more you look at this bill, the worse it is. And this is why I said, as always, when we talk about this bill, please do write to your MP, email them to your MP saying, please do not let this bill pass, fight against this bill, even if they are a Conservative. If you've already written to them once, write to them again. Keep on writing to them. And like I say, if you know other people, get them involved in this as well. So it's really important that MPs know that there is widespread opposition to this bill. So, as always, guys, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, guys, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.